So typically, if you recognize this set and you recognize this man here, you would have him interview everybody, but today we're going to interview the man, Lewis House, the author of a book that's completely blown me away. I kind of have to open up to you and tell you, you know, how this whole thing happened with this book. So the first time I was reading an article, I think it was an Inc. Magazine article that said, here's the 5 books you need to read in 2014 or 15 when this came out. It was The School of Greatness. And I read the book and I said, you know, it's a modern version of A Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. Good book, but I didn't recommend it to anybody.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, I didn't recommend it to anybody.
Sure.
But I thought it was a good book.
Right.
This book, I read this book, and I'm telling you right now, everybody in the world needs to read this book. And I'll tell you a story why. It's called Mask of Masculinity. So many, many years ago, I, as a A-type personality, you know, cocky, competitive, I'm going to take over the world, I'm all this other stuff that we have in our minds. Years ago, I had a guy named Bob Hastings who tells me I need to read a book called Samson Syndrome. So I said to the side, I don't need to read the book.
Right.
And then he calls my wife and he says, Jennifer, you need to read this because your husband's got to read this book. So then Jennifer reads the book Samson Syndrome. She reads the book. We're in bed. And she says, babe, you got to read this book, Samson Syndrome. This is exactly a book that I believe every woman needs to read to understand men better. So prior to getting into it, you know, what made you even want to write a book like this, especially with all the stuff that's going on right now? What made you want to write a book like this?
Because I realized that I was living in a lot of pain and suffering, and I didn't want to feel trapped anymore emotionally. I was achieving so much in my outer world. I was very competitive. I still am, but I was very competitive. And everything was a live or die situation on winning and being right, essentially. And I achieved a lot financially, sports-wise, all those things. But I felt empty and unfulfilled still, and I never knew why. I just thought this was the way of life. So I would always strive for more and more and more, and nothing would fulfill that emptiness or that loneliness. And when I finally, 4 years ago, started opening up about a lot of things that I was afraid of people knowing about me, it gave me so much freedom. Now people knew everything about me, and they still liked me, they still loved me, they still accepted me. They almost loved me even more, the stuff they knew about me that I was afraid of. I said, wow, it's a sense of freedom that I never had in my life. And the things I started opening up about were I was raped by a man when I was 5, and for 25 years I didn't tell anyone. And it was just constantly in the back of my head. You know, it was constantly ruling my life. And everything else that I was ashamed of, feeling like an insecure, stupid kid who was in the special needs classes, being dyslexic, being kind of picked on, just like all those other things I didn't want to talk about. So I would mask them by being a great athlete, by making money, by showing off in other ways to gain acceptance and to belong into the world. And I realized that was a lot of it was a facade. And I felt resentful always of myself because other people really didn't know who I was. And I wasn't allowing them to see me for who I was, and yet they were accepting me for something I wasn't.
Were you acting? Did you feel like you're acting like you're being somebody you're not, or?
I think it was more subtle. It was like subconscious. It wasn't like, I'm going to do this to like fit in.
Posture, like was there posturing or not really?
No, I think it was just like I was defensive and guarded and insecure a lot.
Wouldn't let anybody in.
Yeah, I wouldn't let people in.
Interesting.
I would let them into a certain place. I'd be like, come here and then stay away. You know, it was like, come here close enough, but then not too close. Desire me, but don't get to fully know me. You know, want me, but you can't have me.
Was this with everybody, including mom, dad, your brother, your family?
Everyone.
Everybody?
Everyone, yeah. And I wasn't even aware of it, though.
Got it.
I think it was just like, well, this is the way life is. You're not supposed to open up. You're not supposed to express these things. You're not supposed to talk about these insecurities or these things that have gone through, because then you won't fit in. Then people won't like you. Then they're going to judge you. So it was just my own like misconception of how to live a meaningful life. And I was like, but they'll love me and they'll accept me and they'll appreciate me if I can provide for them, if I achieve certain results, if I make money, if I whatever, have the nice house, the car, whatever. Then they'll accept me and think I'm cool, I'll fit in. And I realized at 30, when a lot of things in my life were kind of crumbling down in my inner world, I went through kind of a bad breakup, with my girlfriend at the time. I had a bad breakup with my business partner at the time. And I was taking all of this anger and frustration out into the world. If someone looked at me the wrong way, it was like, you want to fight me type of mentality. It was like if someone cut me off in a car driving in LA, which like you've been here, so it was like, let me get up in front of you and show you I'm number one. Like, or let me, even one time I got out of my car. I was one of those guys who was like, you're going to do this to me. Like, it was like an attack on my life, right? So everything felt like an attack. I played basketball and I got in a really bad fight with a guy who I felt like he was attacking me. And it was like I didn't know how to express myself in healthier ways than just being angry and reacting.
What caused this though?
What caused what?
What caused this wanting to not open up with everybody? What caused this rage? Fear. What caused this fire?
I think the fear of not being accepted and not fitting in. We all want to belong. We all want to feel loved and feel accepted. No one wants to be isolated for a long time. No one wants to feel like they don't belong to a community. And I felt very isolated my entire childhood. So I just didn't want to feel alone anymore. Alone in my family, alone with my friends, school, all these things. So I said, what can I do to fit in better? What can I do to get acknowledged better? What can I do for people to love me for something as opposed to make fun of me for something? I think a lot of kids go through a phase of like getting picked on, bullied, made fun of. Like it happens to all of us. So it's not like I had a unique situation. But there weren't really tools when you're 5 of like, oh, you just got raped by a man. Here's what to do. There's no hotline for when you get sexually abused.
Did you even bring that up to mom or dad?
No one knew.
Really?
Why would I tell my mom or dad when the shame, the guilt, the insecurity, I don't even know what really just happened. The feeling of like, I know something's not right, but I'm not sure. How do I talk about this?
So how did you start? I mean, so you're saying 25 years. Did you start with family first and then the public? Or
I started with, it was actually a workshop that I went to. So after all this kind of stuff happened in my relationships, business, intimate, fighting on a basketball court, I was like, okay, something's not working. Like, yes, I'm achieving things on the outside world and people say that I'm killing it, but why is my inner world suffering constantly? So I said, okay, it's time. Maybe it was 30, I hit 30 and I was like, all right, I'm finally willing to like look within. Maybe it was like the perfect storm of these kind of like arguments and breakups and fights where I was like, all right, something's not working. Let me look within. And so I talked to therapist friends, I hired like coaches, I went to workshops. I was like, all right, let me just try anything. And even though I was kind of like, I already know this stuff, you know, everything you're telling me.
Because you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm teaching this, I know this stuff, like what can you teach me? I still had that egoic mentality of like, all right, I guess this is the way I am, deal with it. And I went to a workshop that was about 50 people in it. It was an emotional intelligence workshop.
Is that the Chris Lee
one? Yeah. And it was almost like, you know, even the first few days, I'm kind of like, why do I need to be here? This is stupid. Like, I should be teaching this workshop, right? That's what I tell myself. But there created a lot of games and exercises where we talked about like our past with our relationships with our parents. It was kind of like group therapy in a sense. But
similar pain amongst the 50 people, or?
Yeah, but everyone had a different experience. Everyone had like stuff with their mom or their dad, or breakup in the past, or a divorce, or like some people had like their kids who passed away and were like dealing with different issues.
So this is a lot of deep issues.
A lot of deep issues. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot.
Local here in SoCal.
Local here in LA, but people were coming from all over the place, and it got to a point where it's the 3rd day of this 5-day experience. And the people are really opening up at this time. People are talking about their biggest fears, the challenges, and so people are being vulnerable. I'm kind of just still acting like I'm cool. But I addressed a lot of these things. I addressed stuff about my parents with people. We did these exercises and games and group stuff, and I addressed some of these things. And then there's a point where Chris said, okay, we have talked about everything from your past that hasn't worked for you, or that's holding you back, or that you're afraid of, or that you're insecure about. We've talked about it all.
Had you already opened up, by the way?
No, he said,
you still haven't opened up.
He said, this is the turning point. If you haven't addressed anything you need to talk about still, if there's anything that's holding you back, if there's anything you're afraid to talk about, if there's anything that like, he just rambled it off, and I was like, he was like, now is the time to speak, or forever hold your peace, because we're moving towards the future now of the life you want to create. And I was thinking to myself, I talked about my brother being in prison and me having no friends for 4 years because none of the neighborhood parents would let their kids.
And you were young, weren't you? 8 years old? Yeah, 8 years old.
And that was like, you know, in a white, middle-class suburban neighborhood, no other white people were going to prison that I knew in my little town. It was like a small town, so it was like I was the bad kid, right?
He's next. He's going to be next doing this. Yeah.
I talked about that. I talked about my parents being divorced, which pretty much everyone else in the room talked about their parents being divorced. I talked about being in the special needs classes, like all these things that I was frustrated with. I talked about past relationship challenges, you know, fears, and I was like, what about that time when I was raped? It just kind of went through my mind. And I was like, why have I never told anyone this? Yet, it's been on my mind every single day for 25 years.
Every single day?
Every single day, like I would have an image or just like a quick thing and I would just like pass it to the side. Like, it wasn't like I thought about it constantly, but it was like
a song, a movie.
I didn't want to bring it up, you know, and I'd be like, okay, well, it just happened, whatever. And I was like, why have I never talked about this? So in that moment, I was just like, whether it was everyone else was opening up and like, it was the context of this experience and I just felt like I had to do it now. So I got up in front of the room and told the whole story for the first time in front of these 50 people. And I couldn't look anyone in the eyes. I was just looking down at the floor because I was so ashamed and guilty and insecure about what they would think of me.
Was there anybody there that you knew or no? Was it just me?
I mean, I'd gotten to know them.
Family, friends were not there?
Yeah. So it was kind of like strangers.
So you open up?
Open up.
In tears, you're looking down?
I don't even show emotion. I'm like looking down the whole time and I talk about it. And then I tell the whole story from the sight, the smell, the taste, everything. Sit down and it was like an eruption of emotions. I was just bawling for the next few minutes. I couldn't control myself. It was just like, finally I was allowing myself to express the pain that I was feeling my whole life. And there was these two women on either side of me just like holding me and crying as well. So it was like it was healing, but I was also like terrified of what these people were gonna think of me. So I run out of the hotel conference room, right, where we're doing the workshop. I run out of the hotel. Outside, there's like a back alley with a wall, and I just like go up against the wall, put my head in my hand, and I'm just like crying. I'm like, I don't want anyone to see me, I'm embarrassed. And it was probably one of the most beautiful experiences I had. What happened next? One by one, the men who were in that room came up to me and looked me in the eyes, and they were like, you're my hero. They just all came up to me and they're like, you're so courageous, like this is so brave of you, you're my hero. And then something interesting, they started opening up about their experiences that they were unwilling to talk about. Some of them faced sexual abuse, others, it was other things they hadn't said yet that they were ashamed of and they'd been holding on to. And all of them just started talking to me about everything. And they were like, I will follow you anywhere. If you have the courage to talk about this, like, then I trust you. I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
Were you expecting that reaction?
Like, no, the opposite. I was expecting like them to push me away, to make fun of me, whatever. I was just afraid. And so that helped me. They were like, you need to tell your family this and your friends. I was like, no way. You know, you guys are strangers, so who cares if I never see you again? But I was like, no way.
At this point, are you already Lewis House? Are you already School of Greatness?
This is a year into School of Greatness. So the School of Greatness had some success, but
the book hasn't come out yet, though.
That book hadn't come out yet.
Okay.
No, this is pre-book. So I had a following and had some other stuff. I just sold a company, like, but nothing really to this level. And they said, you should tell your family. And I was like, terrified. I told a therapist friend of mine, I said, hey, this is something that happened to me. Because I thought like, okay, she would be in confidence, she can't share this. Mm-hmm. And she was like, you should really share it with your family. And I was like, I don't know how do you start that conversation? How do you tell your mom who found the babysitter and it was the babysitter's son who did it? How do you tell your mom that story? How do you tell your older sisters, your brother, like the people you idolize in your life? And she said, she gave me a great question to ask them first. She said, when you get on the phone or you talk to them in person, ask them this question. Is there anything that I could ever say or do that would make you not love me?
Start with that.
I mean, have a normal conversation
sure,
and then say, hey, listen, there's something I want to share with you, but I want to ask you first, is there anything I could ever say or do that would make you not love me? Because I think the fear was they weren't going to accept me. Mm-hmm. And she said, just see what they respond with first. If they question it, then maybe don't tell them right away. Or like, we'll come back another time, you know. But all of them were like, absolutely not. I mean, my brother right away, he was like, absolutely not. Like, you know, he went to prison. He was like, you can do whatever you want. It's not going to be as bad. You know, I'm still going to love you. And so each one of them kind of gave me permission to open up as well by asking that question. And again, it was just a beautiful experience. Like, I was worried and scared, but I learned things about them that I didn't know, about my closest family members. They opened up about stuff from their childhood, you know. And it brought a connection that was so much deeper than what we already had. And then I started sharing with my friends one by one. And this was terrifying for me as well. It was like, okay, family has to love me. Now,
friends have limitations.
Are my friends going to accept me? You know, who are my real friends here? But one by one, I started asking them, talking to them and saying, hey, I have something I want to share with you that I'm a little embarrassed of and scared of. Are your response? Are you open to listening? And all of them were just so receptive and open, and you know, and again, they started to share other things about their life. And then they said, you should do this publicly. And I was like, fuck no. There's no way I'm gonna, like, friends and family is one thing, but why would I let the world know? And it took about 6 or 7 months of people just saying, this is so powerful to hear this from someone that looks like you, like a tall, white male jock. Many guys like you aren't opening up about this. And the statistics are that 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused. And yet, you don't really hear about people talking about it. Specifically, athletes or former pro athletes or business leaders, they're not like opening up about these things. And what I was realizing, the more I was doing it one-on-one, it was bringing healing to myself and to the other people. And so enough people convinced me to do an episode on my podcast. And I was terrified, right? I was terrified, but I had a friend of mine interview me and facilitate it. This was 4 years ago. Interview me and facilitate it. And I held on to it for like 3 months. I couldn't post it. I was like still terrified. I was like, I don't want to rub people the wrong way. I don't want to upset anyone. What if it hurts my business? I was just like...
Yeah, of course.
I was just worried about it, like everything.
Sure.
Like sensitive topic, like I just wasn't sure. So I asked a female influencer in that space. I was like, can you listen to this? Can you like write the title for me? Can you make sure I'm doing it the appropriate way to not hurt people or offend people or anything? And then I publish it. And I remember I was just like, one night I was like, okay, I'm gonna publish this. Like, it's time. And it was right over here. I published it and I went outside on my balcony. And I remember I just tweeted the link and that's all I did. It was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I remember sitting outside and looking up, and it was like the biggest moon I'd ever seen in my life. And that was the night of like this super moon that was supposed to be like the big, like once every 100 years, this thing coming. I was like, this is crazy, right? And everything on Twitter is like photos of this super moon. And I just tweeted this thing. I was like, this is weird. And then I go to bed and I wake up the next day to just hundreds of emails.
Wow.
From men emailing me saying, thank you so much for this episode. And then essays of them opening up for the first time about what they'd been through, whether it be sexual abuse or relationships or whatever. And I was like, oh my, it took me a couple weeks to just recover from reading all the emails of like the pain and suffering that so many men were going through. And I realized this is the most impactful episode I'll ever do, probably, or this topic. And that's the moment where I was like, I need to dive in deeper on this because this is way more powerful than talking about marketing and business, which I was doing. But this is the stuff that will help your business to a whole nother level. This is the stuff that will help your relationship, your health.
You'll actually be able to enjoy life more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what put me down that path of like, okay, I want to research this more. I don't know like what the statistics are, the psychology behind this. I just know from my personal experience and that it's helping a lot of people. And so I said, this is like what I get to do next was a book on this. I was in the middle of writing this and talking about the School of Greatness. And then everyone was like, okay, what's next? Let's do the business book. Let's do the marketing thing. Let's do this. And I was like, that just doesn't feel right. This feels right because so many men that I grew up with never talked about these things. And I've been going on this book tour, and about 50-50 men and women are showing up. And I go, okay, raise your hands, ladies, who are in the room. If every single week you get together with your girlfriends and you talk about your fears, your insecurities, your relationship issues, your body issues, whatever, work issues, raise your hands if at least once a week you get together. Every hand goes up and they're like, this is pretty much every day. You know, we're on the phone with each other, we're having lunch, we're talking about these things. I go, okay, for the guys in the room, raise your hand if once a month you have one guy friend or a group of guys where you get together and you talk about fears, insecurities, challenges with your relationships. 2 or 3 hands out of like 100. And I'm like, I bet you guys are in a church group, a men's group where you do this. They're like, yes, it's a men's group.
That's it. Because companies are not going to do it. Friends are not going to talk about this stuff.
Exactly. It's just not as acceptable to open up and express yourself as men in our society. It's the conditioning. I don't know if you played sports growing up, but for me it was like...
Not at your level. I had fun. I didn't have 17 receptions, 418 yards, NCAA record.
But here's the thing. I think anyone can relate to this, whether it be on the playground or, you know, in recess, in a classroom with other kids, playing sports, music, whatever it is. Especially in sports, as a guy, if you show weakness, they say man up. Don't show pain. Like, get back up. Let's go. You got to play, right? And I think that is that conditioning and training of the mind of like, okay, I can't show weakness, otherwise I'm not going to fit in. I'm not going to play. They're going to keep on me. They're going to make me sound like I'm weak. All these things play into the rest of our lives. And I think it's hard to break a habit of conditioning for 10, 20, 30 years. And so for me, it was really like, let's have these conversations first and see if we can bring some peace to our past and not be reactive as men and all human beings when something triggers us. You know, when someone says something to me or I feel attacked or I feel abused, not to quickly just defend myself and be this alpha male of like, I need to dominate and be right and win over you. But how can I let it go? How can I come from a different place of love or a different neutral response so that I put my energy towards my vision and my own health as opposed to my energy on someone who just cut me off on the road? Because that's not going to serve humanity.
Let me ask you, who were you in high school? So if I knew you in high school, we went to high school together, who was Lewis Howes in high school?
I was like the kid who was just trying to fit in the sports group.
Really? You were you were a good athlete, but you were trying to...
I was a varsity athlete as a freshman.
You said something about I was always the youngest athlete, exactly. Right? Is that what you said?
As a freshman, I played 3 sports varsity, right? Basketball, they actually said...
Freshman?
Freshman, yeah.
So everyone's older than you, obviously.
Everyone's older, so I'm like just as good, if not better than the seniors. But I was the rookie, so they would make fun of me.
Got it.
They pick on me, they make fun of me, they whatever. So I was just trying to like hang out with the upperclassmen all the time, you know, on the bus rides, after practice. And so I always had to prove myself. It was like I had to prove myself on the sports field, and then I had to prove myself afterwards that I was mature enough or could get whatever. And it was funny, when I was a senior, it's like all my friends were gone now, and I was the oldest. It was the first time I felt like, okay, now I can kind of give back, and how do I want to treat the younger classmen as opposed to picking on them? How can I like...
You're a senior now.
Yeah, and I started like thinking that way. And I remember my senior year, I tried everything. I joined tap dance class. I did the school musical. I was in choir. I was like trying everything. I did synchronized swimming.
You did synchronized swimming. I was just like, do you have videos of you?
I want to find it because it was awesome.
Gotta be out.
It was awesome. I gotta find it. Yeah, I'm gonna ask someone. And I remember I was just like, I just want to try it all. I don't want to be like this jock anymore that's just trying to prove himself in sports. I want to connect with all my classmates and learn from the artists, the singers.
So you've been curious for a while. This is not a new thing. Like you were always...
So I was fascinated by people. My junior, senior year, I really was like, I want to understand.
Did everybody know who you were in high school? Like, were you already the stud?
It's a small school, like 300 kids.
Okay.
So I was, everyone knew who I was. It was a tiny school. I mean, everyone knew who everyone was.
Sure.
But, yeah.
Sure. Got it. Interesting. So, you know, I read this book, and obviously some of the stats that you have in, and by the way, while we're talking about this book, today, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, Kevin Spacey,
Louis C.K.
Louis C.K., yeah, the comedian. Then you have all these other
CEOs of companies.
It's not going to stop. It's going to continue.
NPR, Amazon,
Uber, NPR.
Harvey Weinstein.
Yep.
You've got domestic violence in the NFL every year where some guy beats his wife in an elevator or whatever.
Right.
Every year that happens. You've got the Vegas shootings, the racial marches in Charlottesville, the shootings in a church, the bombings all around the world. The common denominator is men who are leading the way for all these things.
Yeah, and here you say the chances of suicide. And by the way, I don't think enough people are talking about suicide. It says 1 in, what is it?
1 in 6 or
1 in
7.
6, right? Yeah. And versus women, you know, the numbers men to women suicide is 1 in 6, which is absolutely astronomical.
And, you know, there's more male criminals who are in prison than female who are committing crimes.
Do you think a big part of it, because I noticed you talk, is it because there's the outlet? Is it because it's being released versus being held inside because women are willing to talk to someone else?
I think from just an uneducated point of view, yes. And then also what psychologists are saying is yes. You know, again, men are creating more heart attacks. They're dying younger than women. Mm-hmm. It's like, why? Well, when you never express yourself in a healthy form, something's going to manifest in your body, or it's going to rage and come out somehow. Again, it's just the show of hands of people I was doing my book tour is like men aren't opening up about these things.
Right.
In general, they're not talking about it. And you can find a therapist to open up to. It doesn't have to be like a group of guys.
Sure.
You can find your wife, your guy friend, whatever. But I think when we don't talk in general, as human beings, it doesn't matter man, woman, or gender nonconforming, if we don't express how we're feeling, it's going to manifest in a negative way.
I'm going to tell you an interesting thing that happened to me. So one time I'm flying from a business trip back. It's a 6-hour flight. So I'm in LA at that time and I'm flying back probably from a Florida trip. And this was a time when I'm building a business at the beginning stages of it, probably 2008. My wife and I haven't proposed yet. We haven't, gone to the point where I got married June 26, proposed March of 2009. So on this flight back, I have so much pressure on me, right, from everybody. And everybody's looking at Patrick, he's the decision maker, he's the leader. So I grab a notepad on a paper, on a plane, and I start writing. And the system was, who have I hurt and who has hurt me? Yeah. And how has that caused me, and is there a trend? Is there a trend with the people? Is there a trend with who I attract? Is there a trend? All of this stuff, right? Yeah. So Louis, I'm going through this, and all of a sudden I start crying like a little baby. So I'm covering myself. So no one sees me, right? And I'm just sitting there writing this, and then I come home. The reason why I remember this because we moved to a new office, and I just found these notes because I had a new safe. Huh. And I have it in my briefcase, and I take it out of my briefcase and I put it on the bookshelf. My wife sees it, okay? So she sees it and she opens it up to see what it is because she sees her name on it. And she sees all these other girls and she sees all these other, and she starts going through it. And I'm like, oh my, so I come home that night. And she looks at me. She says, babe, I just want to tell you I love you. Wow. I'm like, that's great, babe. I'm glad you what's going on? Do you need something? She said, I just want to tell you I love you, babe. You're so amazing to me. You're so this, you're so that. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I said, babe, what's prompting this? You're kind of acting very funny. And she starts getting emotional. You're such an amazing. I said, babe, this is like, you crossed the line.
I'm freaked out. What's wrong?
And then she says, I feel guilty. I feel bad, but I'm so glad it happened. I said, babe, what happened? She said, I read these notes. You left it out. I said, babe, did you really read this? Yes. Why would you? And I was furious on why she read this, because I had hid it. And when we were moving, and so I'm like, you went through this. She says, I went through this. So that kind of opened up to a conversation, but for mine wasn't by choice. Mine was accidental. And I cannot tell you what it did to our relationship, okay, on her and I, purely accidental. And then after that, I, as a person running a business, a lot of times everybody looks at you as you're a driver. We got 5,000 insurance agents in 49 states, so you know what you're doing. You got all these decisions. The moment I had a group, because I used to be part of a group called Vistage, you may have heard of Vistage, YPO, these groups that CEOs get together. So I find this group, these guys are all running about relatively the same business, $100 million a year business, system is the same. So we went out and we started talking. And one person started talking about their struggles. Then another guy opened up. then another guy opened up, then another guy. Louis, it became the most rewarding experience for me at that time. I can't even explain to you. So again, going back to this, when I read this, I went through it. So you have all these different masks, right? If I can say it, and maybe we can address it a little bit. So you got the Stoic Mask. Yeah. Because every man must be invulnerable and tough. Emotions are carefully managed and suppressed. So Stoic could be like, Marcus Aurelius and some of the stuff that, what's his name? Ryan Holiday writes, and some of it's from Robert Greene. Yep. The athlete mask, the material mask, the sexual mask, which was profound. The aggressive mask resonates. The Joker mask, which was unbelievable when you talk about Robin Williams and what he went through. The world's laughing, yet he's not happy.
Crazy, right?
The Invincible Mask, the Know-It-All Mask, and the Alpha Mask. So out of these, I have conflicting thoughts when I'm reading this. Yep. Because there's a part of me that sits there and says the following. So let me tell you what I'm struggling with. I want to hear your views, because you're the author, so you've done research, and it's obviously, you have some people with psychologists, doctors, universities, Oklahoma University, all this stuff that you've done your proper research. Here's my struggle with it. So I read a book called Hypomanic Edge and First Rate Madness. They talk about the commonalities of craziness and madness and massive success. Okay, right. Kennedy's in it, Clinton's in it, Jobs is in it. It's just a list of people that you and I know, we admire, and we read about. And then I read The Way of Men, which I don't know if you've read The Way of Men. Phenomenal book. It's written by the author. You got to have the author on your show. I think you and him will hit it off, because of the things you write about. He talks about how men were built to build a gang. So we need to build a gang, and it's formatted why we have this need and why we're being we're being pansified today, where men are being shown as being weaker, and you shouldn't show strength. And every show is about making fun of men, because it's more funny to make fun of men today, but we can't with making fun of women because it's politically not correct to do that, and the media is not going to get you, so it's going to affect your business. Then I read another book called what is it? No More Mr. Nice Guy. Is that the book? No More Mr. Nice Guy. And then there's another one, Samson Syndrome. This is my challenge with this. I hear your story like yours. Parents got a divorce. My parents got a divorce. Older brother, all this stuff. I was a troubled kid, lived in Iran 10 years. We escaped Iran 6 weeks after Khomeini dies. I live at a refugee camp 2 years, just a terrible situation. Parents get a divorce, comes to the States, 1.8 GPA. I go to the Army. The Army was my vengeance and my place to release, and 101st Airborne Air Assault. Right. Then I see a trend. And the trend I see is this. And this is my struggle with this, okay? On one end, I feel bad. On one end, I sit there and I say, man, what Kevin Spacey's father did to him, to his son, I don't even want to say it because it's absolutely outrageous what happened. That father needs to go to prison for something like that to happen. You hear the stories with all of these guys, with Ray Lewis, when you talk about it, with him and his father, the whole thing about, what was it, 21, 41, 61, 81, oh my gosh.
Repeating the patterns,
It's incredible when his dad takes him to this place and he says, here's a man called, some interesting...
Grandfather,
Yeah, so then, but this is the trend that I see. I have so many people I know that grew up in normal families, mom and dad married, church going, easygoing parents. Yeah. Honey, I love you. You're the best. And you're sitting there saying, I wish I had parents like this. Good brother, good mom. Mm-hmm. Christine, I'm talking to her about her family. We moved a lot, but we didn't mind because our family, we loved them so much. My brother, so I'm like, that's not how I relate to it, right? So you see a trend about absolute mess of a life that is almost a resume to be able to do something great, right? So you have this conflict, and so sometimes, the struggle becomes, do I want to create such a perfectly healthy environment I got 3 kids, I got 2 boys and a daughter, 5, 4, 1, so you sit there as a parent and you want them to do great things. So I tell them, buddy, there's 4 things we do as a family. We lead, we respect, we improve, we love. You got to love everybody because everyone's going through something. You got to respect everybody because you can learn something from everyone. You got to improve because it's the only way we can have peace. And you got to lead in every situation, even if it's a tough one. We don't get bullied. We don't bully people. Every day I tell these kids this, right? Then they're in school, they get into a fight, somebody punches them in the face. Last week, what was it? Was it this week or last week? This week. This week, I get an email on Monday about my oldest 5-year-old, and I get an email on Monday about my middle son. They both knocked out kids and punched them in the face, and they had a wonderful weekend. Their grandpa was in town. So you read this and you say, okay, all this stuff is great, but if I try to prevent a touch of madness happening with them, what are the chances of these kids being able to fully go out there and have a desire to want to prove a point, kind of like you have a willingness to prove a point? So I think the biggest
I'll give you the answer.
I'm really curious. The balance.
I'll give you my answer.
Well, I want to hear it. I want to hear what you think, because.
So let's say there's a lot of great examples of musicians who die at like 27, or young musicians who are like brilliant, have these massive careers, like change culture and society by what they said. You got Robin Williams. I don't know how old he was. I'm assuming his late 50s or early 60s maybe, but died way too young. And he made the world laugh, but he wasn't able to find peace within himself because there was some darkness. I can only imagine. I remember not meeting Robin Williams, but I walked next to him on a plane one time, and he was already performing. Like he was sitting next to someone like telling a joke. I just like kind of saw him for a second, walked by, and he was like performing. And I remember his greatest movie for me was not, Aladdin and Mrs. Doubtfire. It was Good Will Hunting. I don't know if you remember that movie, Good Will Hunting. One of my favorite movies.
Of course.
I can imagine that is actually who Robin Williams was more like. Sensitive, mentor, emotional.
You're saying he was like that?
In his real life, I bet he wanted to be more of that. I bet he was very philosophical.
That was so natural. Let me tell you, that was not acting. For that moment.
It was him.
That was him.
That's how I felt. I was like, man, that was probably really him.
Just got the chills right there.
Like just caring, deeply caring for people, like wanted to help people. But you can imagine, like, if any time you would act sensitive and loving and caring and compassionate and thoughtful, when people say, tell us a joke, Robin, tell us a joke, like make us laugh.
It became his identity. The world made that his identity.
In order to fit in, he probably had to, because they're always like, they weren't accepting him for who he was, so he's like, oh, let me do an impression, let me do a joke, let me do this, let me tell you a story about this. And like, he was able to fit in. Again, I don't know everything that went down, but I can only imagine that might have been the pressure he was facing. But he was probably a lot more sensitive and open. Here's what I thought. Because I realized that there's no way I would have been able to achieve the levels that I did athletically and in business without all the darkness that I went through. I can say that for a fact. But is it worth it if I'm going to suffer inside every single day? And if there's never anything that brings me inner peace and fulfillment? So what I realized is that when I shift my vision, instead to prove people wrong and prove the bullies wrong from my childhood, prove the kids wrong who took me last, prove the girlfriends that broke my heart wrong about me, and changing my vision to lifting others up and impacting people and inspiring them through my vision and through my actions, as opposed to making others wrong and me needing to be right, I realized that my fuel, my energy is just as powerful, and I can sleep at night. I never was able to sleep at night without like taking a couple hours for me just laying there. I was always fidgeting.
Really?
Always.
Really? From what
30.
age?
From as long as I can remember.
Seriously?
Yeah, from 5 years old, 4 years old. Every night I would just lay there in bed. Like it didn't matter how much I worked out that day. It was just like I would always lay there.
Your thinking is what you, no matter how tired you are.
Just thinking and analyzing. And when I hit 30, when I started to go through this process, it was like, what, I can sleep? You know, I did everything, like blackout shades, I tried it all, like the perfect temperature, nothing would help me sleep. Meditation, nothing. And it wasn't until I started to process my emotions and kind of heal from the past where I would just go to bed in like 5-10 minutes. Like I can lay down and go to bed in like 10 minutes now. Yeah. Boom. Like maybe I'm thinking a little bit, if I'm still on my phone, it's gonna take a while, but if I'm like, just go lay down and relax, I go to bed and I wake up rested. And I wake up at peace in my heart. And that gives me energy throughout the day. So I'm not always trying to recover. So I think coming from that place of a purposeful vision, as opposed to proving people wrong and needing to look good all the time, allows me to sleep better and just gives me that fuel to be driven to make an impact. And that's the difference for me.
Yeah, so for me, I study people. I'm fascinated by people. I am just so fascinated by people. I sit there and I'll just, like when I'm reading this, I'm curious about you. You're a fascinating human being, right? So I sit there and I say, how was his relationship with his dad? Mm-hmm. Was he close with his dad? Mm-hmm. Was he close with his mom? Was there a bad breakup early? And then there's a part of me, when you sit there and you look at like Teddy Roosevelt's story, this guy gets, his first 2 wives die, and his first kid or first 2 kids die, and then he becomes a president. And so again, that's the conflicting part about...
What's the statistics with presidents? I think it's like 30 or 40% of the presidents lost their dad early on, or something
yes.
I can't remember the statistic, but it's a high statistic.
Very high statistic. So this is why, for me, for instance, okay, I run a sales force, and I'll tell you the mistakes I made my first 2 years. Here's how I ran my first 2 years. You know what? We're going to win. I have your back. We're going to do this together. I believe in you. You're so awesome. We're so amazing, blah, 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 and all this stuff. I'm going to protect my guys. Bullshit. So and then all of a sudden I said, instead of me saying that, my approach changed, and I said, Louis, what do you want to do? Are you okay being this person in your life right now? If everything ended, you kept going like this, where are you going to be at 50? You okay with that? You have a choice. It's binary. Okay? I'm not okay. Kind of like when you say sex is binary. You know? I'm not. So what do you think about that? What are your parents going to... Are you okay with that? Are you happy? What makes you happy? Are you content? Are you happy? So I became more about pulling, kind of like maybe Chris Lee did with that, with you, rather than imposing a perfect life, because there was a time, like for me, I get into the financial industry. I'm working at Morgan Stanley Dean with her. Okay, day before 9/11, I get started. Then 9/11 happens the next day. Monday's 9/10, Tuesday's 9/11. I'm at Morgan Stanley, headquarters at New York. I'm about to go there for training. Probably the worst time to become an advisor. Yeah. Not a good time to get started. Okay. So then I start sizing myself up. I'm at a group, I'm in an office where a guy named Shaq graduated from UCLA. The other guy's a USC kid, Berkeley kid. The girl that was taking my position, they were hiring for one person. She was a UC Berkeley. She had a 1560 SAT score in 1996 out of 1600. She did a 4-year degree in 2.5 years while running a nightclub in UC Berkeley. Genius. She right now has got a very, premier position at a large corporation. Anyways, so I'm sitting there, I'm sizing myself up. Okay. No. I went to Glendale Community College. Got 4 W's. The guys interviewed me, Dave Kirby. He says, so, Patrick, tell me about the university, about the school you went to. I said, I went to Valley Community College. I took a speech class. I went to Glendale Community College. I got 4 W's. I don't have a 4-year. I don't have a 2-year. He says, but I like your military and your sense of humor. Let me hire that part. So he gives me that opportunity. But then I'm this place and I hear all these perfect stories. My father was a broker. My father passed this down. Like, dude, you know what? I don't relate. I'm going to go back to bodybuilding. So for me, a part of this, and by the way, I am telling you, I'm pretty much your agent, because I'm telling you right now, every parent needs to read this. Every man, every woman, everybody needs to read this, because I'm sitting there and I'm reading. Okay, so I go to the chapter about humor. Okay, Patrick, you like to make people laugh. Why are you making people laugh? Is there an escape? What are you escaping for? Yeah, it was escape. You're in war, you're getting bombed on.
You got to have some lightness to it.
So then, but the other part to me is, what if that wouldn't have happened? I wouldn't have this humor to be able to work with the people. So there is a part where, I don't know if it's a destiny thing, I don't know what it is. Is it a part of the formula that's being, Lewis House is being built right now as a guy who, here's the greatness guy, here's a lovable, likable guy. He's been on Ellen DeGeneres show, which is the premier show you want to be on, bigger fun. He's pretty much reached there. But what's next for this guy? Maybe there's something being built for this guy, that he's going to meet a woman. You're with somebody for 3 years. I think the number is 3 or 4 years. And it's very interesting when you talk about the book for this. You were doing the tour while you guys, and then you came back together. Yeah. And then the relationship, how difficult it is. I have to kind of figure out myself, because she has her own thing. It's so fascinating scene. Yeah, maybe something bigger has happened with Lewis House that could happen 20 years from now, that if this didn't happen, this dude could be leading 100 million people.
I definitely believe like everything has happened for a reason, because I'm finding a reason out of it all. And I just know that having humor, being driven to make money, being competitive are not bad things. And so for me, it's like, yeah, bring the humor, bring the joy, make as much money as you want, but what's underneath it?
I love the despite.
If it's 24/7, I have to always make a joke of something. Why? not that it's right or wrong.
Overcompensation.
Is this effective for your future? Is this, like you said, is this what you want in 15 years? Is this going to help you achieve the life you want?
Yeah.
And again, all these things are not bad, I think, but they become 24/7 masks of hiding something of who you actually are, the things you've been through, because you're afraid of people actually seeing you. Then I think you're robbing other people of your gifts and who you are. And I think that's doing a disservice to your life and to other people around you.
100% I'm aligned with you on that.
Yeah.
100% I'm aligned with you on that. So check this out. So I go to the military, I come out. I said, I'm gonna be a bodybuilder. I'm gonna be the next Middle Eastern Arnold. So I'm this big guy. I'm gonna go into Hollywood. I'm gonna be this actor, and I'm gonna marry Kennedy. I'm gonna be this guy, right? Okay.
How'd it go?
No, it didn't work out. I married a HUDman. I went into insurance, financial services. That's the route I took, and I am glad the way it worked out. But bodybuilding to me at that time, I mean, I had posters in the army of Arnold and Chris Cormier and Coleman and, you know, all these guys, and John Travolta with his polyester and these whole things I had. So I started this business, and I start building it, and then all of a sudden I grow, I make money. My dad's working at a 99-cent store, and my dad never told me he loves me. Okay, so one day I called him and I said this. I said, Dad.
Your whole life?
He's never told me he loves me. Now, by the way, he's my best friend in the world.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so he's never told me he loves me. So I said, hey, Dad, I want some things to change in our family. He said, what's that? So I said, I want to tell you I love you, Dad. He says, what do you mean? I said, I love you. He says, okay, why are you, I know, you don't need to tell me this. I said, no, I want you to tell me.
What did he say?
I'm not telling you. You are becoming Americanized. This America's getting you. Wow. I'm not going to tell you. You meet my dad, he's like the most lovable guy in the world. I said, I'm not going to tell you. Get out of the house. So I leave, because we were living together at the time when I got out of the military. So I leave. The next day, I'm at Bally's. And there used to be Bally's back in the day, so I'm at Bally's gym, and he calls. He says, hey, your dad's on the line 1. I said, my dad? So I pick up the line. I say, hey, Dad, what's up? And he's pissed. He said, hey, how you doing? I said, Dad, I'm good. I'm working. Oh, okay. Everything good? Yes, everything good. He says, okay, I just wanted to call you. What's going on there? Is everything okay? No, it's everything okay. So what's up? He says, okay, I love you, bye. Click, he hangs up. So then 30 minutes later, I get a call from my sister. And she's like, hey, Dad, I think Dad's not feeling good.
He told me he loved me.
He loves me, right? So Dad told me he loves me. And I said, because I've been talking to him about this. So this man turns into the most emotional guy. Wow. In my career, I've spoken in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Every time I tell this story about my dad, when on stage, all this other stuff, I get emotional. I think it is so needed for us to not mask ourselves. So I think this book, again, going back to it, there's a part of me that thinks there are so many things that people are struggling with that needs to come out, that you need to face, and it's every one of these things. Sex was a big part when you talk about Strauss and the whole Black Book and being a game and hooking up and all these threesomes and all the things. It's a book everybody's got to read, but there's a flip side of it to me. I think it's, you know, in a point for me to say, I went through this because I'm being prepared for something. I have no idea what it is.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. But the other side is,
but you shouldn't have to hold on to it.
Not at all, because that suffering for me was miserable.
Yeah.
Miserable. And it happened accidentally a couple times until you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I kind of like my own company.
Yeah.
You know? And you know when you can go watch a movie at 10 o'clock in the morning with 80-year-olds at the theater,
exactly.
Social Security retired people, and you're just sitting there saying, I enjoy my own company. So, dude, you got a big following. Like I said to Christine when we came here, to me, you're genuine, you're sincere, you're very easy to follow, you're very easy to cheer and root on as somebody that you want to see. Every time I see you winning, there's like, this dude needs to win, because there's certain people that make the, you know, the marketplace and inspire others to want to pursue it. You're one of those guys. So from me, everybody watching this, how about we do this, Louis? How about I buy 10 of these from you?
Sweet. And we get it signed. Sure. And we put a contest for some of these guys on how they can get it. We can do Instagram or something. Sure. But stay tuned. If you are not following him, and if you don't know this man, you got to follow him on Instagram. It's Lewis House. You got to follow his stuff on YouTube. Podcast is your main platform that I think you drive.
Greatness,
But more than anything else, brother, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been a blast.
Thanks, man.
Truly a blast.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.